What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and we haven't done this since last Tuesday, so we're shaking off the rust a little bit with what is usually my favorite video to record every week. We have my top 10 lessons learned for week 13 of the fantasy football season, where we look at what happened in week 12, we look at the stats and trends, and we apply them moving forward in week 13 and beyond. So with all that being said, we have a lot to get into. As always, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. She gon' let me.
Now, the biggest thing that is on the forefront of everybody's mind in football today, Monday, November 27th, is the Panthers fired Frank Reich. And I haven't really gotten the time to talk much about the Panthers this year. You know, they've been a dumpster fire, of course, in terms of fantasy football. We've talked about the Hubbard-Sanders splits. We've talked about Adam Thielen, and that's really about it. So I kind of just wanted to open this forum, if you will, to just kind of talk about what the Panthers have been, what they have in Bryce Young, and kind of what to expect for them moving forward. Just as like an offense this year and just into perpetuity. They fire Frank Reich. David Tepper has really showed his hand at this point. I think that he took over the team sometime in like 2018, something like that. And they just churn through coaches. We have Matt Rule fired, Frank Reich fired. It's not like either of these guys are great coaches in their own right, but you rarely see such a lack of continuity and like a trial period. And it sucks for a guy like Bryce Young. I saw it as a Jets fan with like Sam Darnold, right? Where I still think Sam Darnold could play not as like a franchise quarterback, but I do think if you tossed him in Brock Purdy's shoes or Tua Tagovailoa's shoes, he wouldn't be an MVP candidate, but I think he would be somewhere between Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr as a QB. So it gets tough, right? You have all of this rocking of the boat where now he's going to have to learn a new playbook next year. And unless if they get the next Brian Johnson, which is the issue with the Panthers right now, is because they trade away that first overall pick, or not first overall pick, but their future pick in 2024, which is going to be possibly the first overall pick. Their job isn't sexy. It was last year when it was like, okay, you get the first overall pick, you can do whatever you want with it. Okay, go for it. But now they went all in on Bryce Young, all in on this coaching staff. And after 12 games, they are done. So really rocky spot here, which is interesting because when I sort of thought back to like the Stroud versus Young debates, which right now, of course, it's Stroud in a blowout. But when we go back to draft season, there's a lot of talk about just kind of like I know some guys out there, I know Bush from the Stock Exchange talks about nature versus nurture or whatever, right? And you do have these teams, like the Steelers and the Patriots that have all this stability, but we're seeing Mac Jones not great. Pickett we'll talk about in a little bit. I think a lot of people's understanding was that the Panthers with Frank Reich, with Josh McCown in that room, with Joe Brady, it was kind of the perfect incubator for a quarterback, whereas the Texans had a defensive-minded head coach, a first-year offensive coordinator in there, and that ended up being the nuts. So I don't really know where I'm going with that, but it is just interesting that from the outside perspective, it looked like Bryce Young was in a much better spot just for like long-term growth, but the NFL is random. Now, when we talk about Bryce Young, there's not much to gain for fantasy football in this calendar year. No one's starting Bryce Young. I guess you're starting Adam Thielen. I guess you're kind of wondering what does Bryce Young look like down the road. I know a lot of us have dynasty leagues. All of us are just kind of curious on the landscape of these quarterbacks in general. I know I actually have a league myself. It's a deep league. It's FFPC, like these high-stakes leagues where it's 20-man rosters, right? So Bryce Young's a guy that we're debating starting week 13 when Lamar Jackson's on bye. So I think that this is sort of relevant here, but just talking about kind of like what you can expect for Bryce Young moving forward. This is EPA per play in rookie seasons for all the rookie quarterbacks I have charted since 2009. And this is all first-round picks sorted by EPA per play, which EPA per play is just on your passes, rushes, penalties, sacks, your per play efficiency, how much you are helping your team put points on the board. That's the number it spits out. Bryce Young falls in a really tough category. Now, he's not, that danger zone of like Rosen through Jamarcus Russell, that's absolutely brutal. He's a small step above, but we're still talking about guys, like Blaine Gabbert, Josh Freeman. I think like the two guys you can point to on this list of like, okay, I mean, maybe he can do it. This is actually also as well every rookie quarterback since 2009, first-round pick with a negative EPA per play. The next guy after Sam Darnold, I believe, is Josh Allen, who had a positive EPA per play. So this is just all of the quarterbacks with a negative EPA per play in their rookie year as first-round draft picks. And it's not great. Like Bryce Young, he does kind of remind me of Zach Wilson in a way where he's like very undersized. He's escaping pressure, but it doesn't take a ton to get him down. He's not all that poised. I think he's definitely better than a guy like Zach Wilson. But as of right now, his play style and play type doesn't look all that dissimilar to a guy like Zach Wilson. Now, I think that he has a higher floor, potentially a higher ceiling. He could be Stafford. He could be Lawrence. I was talking about on Twitter, the thing that really worries me with Young is he doesn't have, especially in fantasy, when we talk about a guy like Justin Fields, and we're honestly sort of blurring the lines here between fantasy, dynasty, and real life, but it's just kind of an open forum, if you will, to talk about Bryce Young. He doesn't have, in fantasy, you could with a guy like Justin Fields, you could say, well, he's going to run the ball a ton. He has like that Michael Vick type upside. Same with like a Trey Lance. But Bryce Young, it's like, even Trevor Lawrence, 6'6", rocket arm. Like Bryce Young has so many obstacles to overcome to the point where he now looks like one of these guys we talked about with Sam Darnold, where if you put him in a Brock Purdy scheme or a Tua scheme, sure, I think Bryce Young could thrive there. But if you need to thread the needle of everything going 100% perfect, absolutely right, like the Carolina Panthers either have to hit on the next Sean McVay or they burn the first overall pick and their 2024 pick and DJ Moore. Because if Bryce Young doesn't have the tools and the arm strength and the mobility and just like the frame to carry, subpar coaching, or not even subpar coaching, but just average coaching, So it does get sort of tough for a guy like Bryce Young to succeed down the line. So I don't know. In the absolute best case scenario, he is Matthew Stafford or Trevor Lawrence. Not unheard of to be bad in year one and then bounce back moving forward. But it also wouldn't shock me if he was one of these guys on this list where it's, Mark Sanchez and Christian Ponder and Mitchell Trubisky and Sam Bradford's actually not a terrible outcome for him. Like the issue is I think that what we've seen so far has really limited his ceiling. He reminds me a lot more of a Goff, where I think if you had like a McVay come in there like it was for Goff, you could see him be great. But if you need a McVay to succeed, that's where it gets tough. That's threading a needle of like needing that it factor coach, which again, their team isn't exactly a destination. So that's just kind of what I wanted to talk about in terms of fantasy. I think it is also worth talking about the running back split. So Deuce Staley also got let go. Deuce Staley, I believe, he was some sort of, I think that he might have just been the running back coach, but he's a guy who was with Miles Sanders his rookie year on the Eagles, maybe even his second year when Miles Sanders had a couple good years. A lot of guys were saying, oh, Miles Sanders back with Deuce Staley, time for fireworks. That was not the case, and the one guy who stuck up for Miles Sanders said, we want to use this guy as a 3-down back, is now gone, put to the wayside. And on the My Fantasy Life utilization report here, you can see Chuba Hubbard has kind of taken the reins back here. He was under 50% of the snaps in week 10 and 11, goes up to 64% of the snaps, 20 PPR points in this game. He looked pretty good on the ground. What was this? This was Panthers versus Titans. I think the Titans are a pretty good rush defense. They haven't been as dominant as they were last year. But yeah, Chuba Hubbard had 14, 45 and a touchdown, 5 catches, 47 yards. 5 catches and 47 yards is really what's going to do it for a guy like Hubbard. Now, Miles Sanders on the other side, 15 attempts for 28 rushing yards for Miles Sanders, man. That is brutal. That is absolutely brutal. If you drafted Miles Sanders, I wish I had something to give you hope, but it's not good. It seems like Chuba Hubbard is the favored guy in passing down situations, right? 68% of the routes last week, whereas Miles Sanders was at 18%. Not good. Chuba Hubbard would be the 1A here, but he's still not someone I'm thrilled to start. He's probably like a high-end RB3. Like in Hero RB builds, you want to stick him in at RB2. You can definitely get by doing that as well. Now, I want to talk about our second takeaway here, which is Dalton Schultz splitting the routes. It's actually a really big bummer. I know a lot of us had Dalton Schultz in leagues, and we were excited about him. And I came out a couple weeks ago, and I was like, Dalton Schultz, man, he might be a top 6 tight end rest of season just because he's been great. CJ Stroud in this offense has been great. And after a 27, like his game logs are crazy. He had 13. So from week 4 on, he had 13, 19, 16, bye week, then 2 points, but then 27, 11, 11. And then this past week dips down to just 1.2 points in PPR settings, 2 targets, 1 catch, 2 yards. That is not good. Now we look over to the PFF snap counts. Shout out Nathan Jonke for those. You can see Dalton Schultz, 22 routes, Brevin Jordan, 20 routes. So pretty much all of Dalton Schultz' usage has been split in half. Now, we haven't had anything that says that Schultz was hurt. Maybe he was hurt. I think it was really more the return of Brevin Jordan, where Brevin Jordan's a guy that they drafted in like the 5th round. Brevin Jordan was actually, he was like, he had a lot of hype coming out of school. And then he tested and he ran like a 4.8 and he fell a ton. It is interesting. He had Brevin Jordan week 7 through week 10. He did not play. He hasn't been this much of a factor, though. This was the highest snap share he's played in a game this year. So it's tough to say if it's a blip on the radar or not, but it takes Dalton Schultz from a guy that I've had comfortably inside my top 10 tight ends every week to probably more of like a 12 to 15 guy this week. And if this continues, falling all the way to like almost unstartable territory. You need to be running 70% of the routes. 22 of 46 is not going to cut it in fantasy football. Now, I also want to talk about the backfield here. You can see towards the bottom, Devin Singletary there. 49 of 60 snaps there. Dameon Pierce, just 11. Now, Dameon Pierce probably working back from injury, but I mean, Devin Singletary is the main guy in this backfield. I think that it's going to be split in terms of rushing. They both couldn't rush at all versus the Jacksonville front seven, which is pretty strong against the run. Singletary had 6 carries for 18 yards, whereas Dameon Pierce had 5 carries for 14 yards, so they both weren't good against that run defense. But you had 7 targets, 6 catches, 54 yards for Devin Singletary, salvaging his day for a 13.2 point PPR point day. So Devin Singletary, you can see as well, 35 of 46 routes. Like, that's absolutely beautiful. Devin Singletary is still going to be a fringy RB2 you can start every week. Dameon Pierce maybe starts climbing, maybe, but unless if he starts showing that he is like the clearly better rusher between the tackles than Devin Singletary, I don't really see him sort of taking the reins back on that role. Now, somebody else I want to talk about, or another offense I wanted to talk about, was the Steelers, right? We have the post-Matt Canada Steelers, right? He's finally gone. He gets fired. People have been calling for his job since week 1. I was surprised that he was actually retained. I think a lot of people were surprised that he was retained. And in the first game back, I wanted to show this. This is from PFF, sort of grading out Kenny Pickett's game-by-game box scores this year. This was the first time this year that not only he had an 80-plus PFF pass grade, he had a 90-plus PFF pass grade. Now, he didn't pass for a touchdown in this game, but he still looked great. 4 big-time throws here. You can see like that final column or the BTT column. 4 big-time throws is a lot in one game. It's a season high for him. It might even be career high. Not a single turnover-worthy play. The offense had it was like the first time they had 400-plus yards in forever. Everyone's been throwing that stat around. Really, really good stuff, man. 8.4 yards per attempt, 278 yards passing. All of that should make us very bullish on maybe not very bullish, but from what an offense that was struggling at one point and was like, man, like these guys are rough starts. They are all probably fine starts. Now, the issue is that Freiermuth really emerged here, and that does put a little bit of a damper on guys like Pickens and Deontay Johnson, right? I will say Freiermuth ran 25 of 37 routes. That's still not a full portion of what we're looking for, but I imagine he's still kind of working back from injury, Freiermuth. I want to say that was a higher percentage than last week. It was right about the same. He had 11 targets, 9 catches, 120 yards. Freiermuth fully back in the back-end tight end 1 conversation. Pickens and Deontay kind of had a down game, but I think that's just going to sort of be the nature of this offense now. Like it's crazy to say, but there's a lot of talent on the Steelers offense. Like Pickens is good, Deontay is good, Freiermuth is good, Najee Harris is good, Jaylen Warren is good. So that's a lot of mouths to feed. And it's almost like a poor man's 49ers offense. They're not all going to get home every single week. So a little bit of a damper on them in terms of floor, but all of them are going to be startable assets in your flex or as a, low-end tight end 1 moving forward. Again, just really exciting for the Steelers. I think that they're going to have more pass-heavy game scripts. They were never really in doubt of losing that game, right? They passed the ball 37 times. They ran the ball 31 times. I think they got off like 71 plays as well, which is really high. So they were playing up-tempo, getting plays off. Really good stuff. They only scored like 16 points, though, I believe, against those Bengals. So we'll see if that many yards can result in more points. I think that we would have had a better fantasy day for everyone not named Freiermuth if we could have scored more touchdowns. I think the only touchdown really scored, I believe it was just Najee, right? I think Najee scored a touchdown, and I'm not really sure what else. It might have been like a defensive touchdown. I should know. But that's really all there's to say about the Steelers this week. Now, another quarterback I want to have a conversation about is Jordan Love. I'd like to start a little bit of a dialogue here with Jordan Love. We did it similarly with Sam Howell. He started to look bad now, but Jordan Love is a guy, man. He is a guy. If I was a Packers fan, I would be stoked. He looked amazing on Thanksgiving. And the thing about Love, like we just talked about Bryce Young, right? Bryce Young, like 5'10"? I guess he's also down like 5'10", 200 pounds, right? And you have a guy like Jordan Love, he's more of your toolsy guy, where Jordan Love comes in 6'4", 225 pounds, rocket arm, and sure, you get some really low lows with Jordan Love, or you have in the past, but he's been great this year, man. He just came off a game here. We had 268 yards on 32 attempts, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 39 yards rushing. He does it all. Back-to-back 20-plus PPR point games. He's been very, very good, even just for fantasy. Jordan Love has been very good in, his first year starting in the NFL. If we just look at points per game among quarterbacks, he's behind, your Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes. And then he's right in this mix of he actually has 18.9 points per game, which is right in between Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Brock Purdy, Tua. And that's over a pretty big game sample, man. Jordan Love has been good for fantasy. This chart here that I'm showing is from Computer Cowboy Ben Baldwin, where he takes EPA per play on the y-axis, which is, again, just per play efficiency, and then offensive grade. So, how are you looking on film by PFF? And the top right corner, in theory, is where the best quarterbacks are, right? Stafford, Hurts, Lawrence, Lamar, Purdy, Dak, Mahomes, all those guys. He's not quite in that area, but him being in the top quarter, I think, is a really strong sign for Jordan Love in just his first year as a starter. I also think, as much people like to give LaFleur some flack for, I think he had that one game where they kicked a field goal late in the game and it really was not a smart move. He can scheme an offense, all right? He's not quite McVay or any of those guys, but he can scheme an offense pretty well. So that's really exciting. On top of that, you have Jordan Love just in terms of the grand scheme of things. Big time throws, 18 to 11. That's the same ratio as CJ Stroud. It's the same ratio as Russell Wilson. It's not quite Sam Howell has 24 big time throws, but on a percentage basis, it's not anything all that different. And he has 21 turnover-worthy plays. So he's much more, he's not as safe with the football as Jordan Love, which is rare for a guy in his first time starting. And you can see as well, he's a 9.6 yard ADOT, highest on this list, tied with CJ Stroud. So again, a lot to like with Jordan Love. I would feel very good about him if I had him in Dynasty, if I was a Packers fan. All of the above. Also, bounce back game for Christian Watson, 7 targets, 5 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown. If Jordan Love plays up to his potential, Christian Watson is a high ADOT down the field guy. His production is going to depend a lot on the quarterback being competent and getting him the ball that far downfield. Outside of, he does get some jet motions and screens and sweeps and stuff, but his big plays are going to be down the field. As Jordan Love comes along here, I think Christian Watson is going to be, not a win at this point. He's been pretty rough this year, but I think he's going to be startable down the stretch here, which is a really good thing to hear. Now, we also have Bijan usage to talk about. Arthur Smith is finally just doing, what we all asked him to. Feed Bijan. He ends up with 16 carries, 91 yards, and a touchdown. He gets 3 catches, 32 yards, and another touchdown. Just an absolutely great game. It just sucks because it feels like Arthur Smith could have just been doing this the entire time. You know what I mean? If he just did this the entire time, Bijan would be a 20-plus point per game running back and a guy that we all feel very happy about. Now, he does have the Jets next week, but then he gets Tampa, Carolina, Indy, and Chicago for what should be just if this can continue throughout the entire rest of the season, Bijan can be a guy that just carries you through the playoffs, and that's really exciting. Now, we talk about as a whole, Arthur Smith, it's funny. Arthur Smith, after losing to the Vikings, has completely done a 180 on personnel management and what we've all been hoping for. This is ideally the situation here. Now, Kyle Pitts, things are looking pretty rough for Kyle Pitts. I'm going to be honest. He had 2 targets of 18 attempts. I will say there was only 18 pass attempts to go around. It's tough. It's going to be tough to produce on just 18 pass attempts, but Kyle Pitts hasn't really done much to say that that's the entire issue. Kyle Pitts did have a injury in the offseason. I think that's also affecting him a lot. But this is what we want. 21 routes run for Drake London, most on the team. Then the next most routes run, Kyle Pitts. Most targets on the team, Drake London, then Bijan Robinson. This is exactly what we want. Drake London had 6 targets in a game where, again, there were only 18 pass attempts. So we can't expect a ton. But Drake London still came down with 7 targets, 5 catches, 91 yards. Gave you a startable day. So this is good. Desmond Ridder looked all right as well. So love to see it across the board. The Falcons' offense is looking like a normal unit, but they're going back to their low-volume ways. So it is really just pick your poison with Arthur Smith, but I'd prefer it in this version. Now, our next thing we're going to talk about here is the world-famous rookie wide receiver report. I do want to say first, this is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Shout out to Underdog Fantasy. They are the best. You can see the sign in the back here. They go crazy. They give us signs. They sent me and my boys out on a trip to film a live draft party, and they also have these new customer specials on pretty much every primetime game. So if you're looking to, get a nice little sweat going for the primetime game, you have the Bears versus the Vikings, not the best in the world, but you can get a little pick 'em slip going. I think if you get 5 correct, you 20 extra money, 4 correct, it's like 10x. I think 3 correct, you 6 extra money. So, 10x, you put in 5, you win 50. You get a free one right here if you are a new customer, right? So if you hop on Underdog Fantasy, I have a link in the description in the comment section down below. Click it, take it Underdog Fantasy. It'll use promo code RON. It'll match your first deposit up to $100, and you'll have this sitting in the pick'em lobby for you to use. You go higher on the 0.5 total yards for Justin Fields. String it together with some fantasy points, some rushing yards. If you like a TJ Hawkinson, if you like a Khalil Herbert, whatever have you, you put them together. You get a nice little pick'em slip to sweat out a Monday night game that doesn't really look all that sexy on the surface. So again, make sure you check it out. Promo code RON. They are the best. New customer special pretty much every primetime game. As always, sponsored by Underdog Fantasy, as all things are on the Ron Stewart channel. Now, when we talk about the rookie wide receiver report, this is us tracking all the rookie wide receivers. So we have their last 3 route percentages, right? So that's just how often are they running a route on pass plays, just, how much are they on the field for passing down? That's all we care about. Targets per route run, how much are you commanding on a per route basis, target-wise? Anything over 20% is good. Yards per route run, how efficient are you on those routes run? 2+ is good. PFF grade, 80+ is elite, 70+ is good. This is percent change. So what was the percent change in PFF grade going into this week, right? So Tank Dell had a certain PFF grade beforehand. Now he's an 83.6. He improved his PFF grade by 1.6% from last week. Now, when we talk about these guys, these are all rookie wide receivers, 150+ routes run, sorted by PFF receiving grade. And we have Tank Dell up first. He's officially unseated Puka Nacua here. He leads all rookie wide receivers, 83.6 PFF grade, target per run insane, yards per run insane. He's had 5 touchdowns in his last 4, 17.2 PPR points. He had that one long ball called back on him. Just an absolute stud. Tank Dell is here to stay. We also then have Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua, not a great week, right? He didn't really do anything. I think he had like 4 catches, nothing to really write home about. But it was a weird game script. They just absolutely killed the Cardinals. They ran Kyren Williams into the ground. Puka Nacua, though, still ends up with 8 targets. He's going to be just fine. Nothing to worry about here. Now, this is the one I wanted to really talk about. Rashee Rice. We've been talking about him all year. He's at the season high with 71% of the routes. Still not. We would really like it to get to that 80% plus area. We're hoping for that. They really rotate those wide receivers in Kansas City, but I think Rashee Rice is starting to get, in the good graces of Reed and Mahomes. And if he can get to 80% plus, this is somebody you're starting as like a wide receiver 2. Every single week. But everything's elite. 25% target per run. Amazing. 2.4 yards per run. Amazing. 80+ PFF grade. Amazing. He comes out here. He gives you 10 targets, 8 catches, 107 yards, and a touchdown this past week. I am very bullish on what Rashee Rice could be. He gives me a lot of rookie year Brandon Ayuk vibes, where he came in as like that weird prospect. Like if you remember, I know people are going to say, oh, well, Brandon Ayuk was amazing. Like people are just going to say, he really wasn't. He was seen as Kadarius Toney, a guy who was drafted in the first round with an awful analytical profile. He comes in year 1, looks kind of raw, but he's this big X wide receiver with a lot of explosion, and that's kind of what we're getting with Rashee Rice. Now, more of a poor man's version. We're talking a second-round pick. We're talking an older pick as well. But he does give us that same vibe as a guy that could be a league winner down the stretch of a redraft season and have a lot of upside later on in his career. We also have Demario Douglas. He's been fun, right? His per route stuff is all great. He did have a concussion, though, so not really anything to write about in this game. Josh Downs didn't have his best game. He had just 9.3 PPR points, but post-bye, 80% of the routes, and he had 13 targets. So he's commanding volume. He wasn't all that efficient in this game, but that's about all we could ask for from a rookie. Zay Flowers, he didn't have a monster game receiving, if that makes sense. He had the long touchdown run, but that's the beauty of Zay Flowers. That's what you drafted him as. That's what the Ravens drafted him as this, all-purpose guy, run the ball, catch the ball, all of that. He scored 2 touchdowns, looked amazing, 20+ PPR points. This is what it could look like moving forward without Mark Andrews for Zay Flowers. We have Jordan Addison, who plays tonight. Jaden Reed continues to flash. He had another 15 PPR point game. He's now at 15+ PPR points in his last 3. He's also cemented himself as like a 79%, 80% route wide receiver. So that's somebody you can now flex on the regular. Jaden Reed. Wicks was out. Michael Wilson was out. We do have Marvin Mims. He's really cooled off at this point. Like there's no, his routes are declining. He still has yards per run that you can sort of fall back on, but there's really nothing else there. Jalen Hyatt. was actually really exciting this week where he had a blow-up game, right? He felt like he was well on his way to face planting. He comes out here with his best route percentage game of the year, his best game of the year. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 109 yards. He gets a bye, and then he gets 5 games here at the end. A little bit of an audition. He might have Tyrod Taylor. He might have this new confident Tommy DeVito, but he's going to have better quarterback play than he's had all year, and 5 games to kind of prove that this was not just a one-off game. So that's exciting for Jalen Hyatt. We also have JSN. 83% of the routes is good, but he ends up with like not much. He had under 10 PPR points for the 3rd straight week. And I hate to say it, I liked him a lot coming out of school, but JSN, I would be concerned. I'm not a film guy, but when I watch JSN play, rarely does he make a play that like jumps off the screen. It's like, man, that guy's a stud. You know? He doesn't make crazy plays. Like Tank Dell, you watch him in like 4 times in those Texans games. He looks absolutely amazing. Again, I'm not a film guy. Maybe someone out there is watching JSN and thinks that he is just absolutely popping off the screen. But to me, he doesn't really scream like absolute dog like some people were drafting him to be. So I'm a bit concerned on him. I don't. It's of course not JS. It's not Quentin Johnston bad. He's still like a top 24 dynasty receiver. Still somebody you're holding in redraft formats. But that, you know, could he be the next Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson? I mean, that's pretty much done here. And I would say comfortably in Dynasty, I'd have him behind. You know, you have that top tier of, I would say, Dell, Addison, Puka. To me, I would have JSN like a comfortable tier behind those guys. We also have Quentin Johnston. He was banged up early, so that route percentage went down. But, I mean, there's really I got nothing. He looks like he's bad at football. Like, that's really all I could say. Xavier Gibson on my Jets. He returned the kick return, or maybe it was a punt return. It was one or the other. Monday Night Football against the Bills in Week 1. Allen Lazard is so bad. Corey Davis retired. Randall Cobb sucks. So he's just been running routes, but that's really it, man. 6.6 target per run. Like he's just like a special teamer who runs route. There's nothing really to see there. Trey Palmer still making highlight plays, not really doing anything else outside of that. Cedric Tillman, new addition to the rookie wide receiver report along with Xavier Gibson. I like Cedric Tillman a ton coming out. He's like this big physical X wide receiver coming out of Tennessee. Super raw. He did outperform Jalen Hyatt in some of their games that they played in. He's been awful this year, but he just had his best game of the year. 5 targets, 4 catches, 55 yards, 11.1% increase in his PFF grade, but that just means he went from like awful to pretty bad, you know? But we'll see. Maybe Cedric Tillman sort of turns things around. I'm not quite sure. Tyler Scott plays tonight. Then you have John Mingo. He put up his second career game with 10 or more PPR points, but still feels hopeless. Like there's really not that's not anything all that impressive, right? If you have 2 10-point PPR point games, you're not really doing a whole lot. John Mingo, pretty brutal so far. Now, that's going to do it for the rookie wide receiver report. Again, make sure you check it out. Underdog Fantasy, promo code RON. They will match your first deposit up to $100. Link in the description, link down below in the comment section as well. Now, some rookie running backs I want to talk about. On top of that, first we have Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell continues to climb here. This is, again, the utilization report on My Fantasy Life. You can see Keaton Mitchell, his snap share just continues to climb, right? He didn't do anything crazy this week. He had 10.9 PPR points, which is great. 9 carries, 64 yards, which is a 7.1 yards per carry. He's still efficient as ever. 2 targets for 25 yards, also great. Gets a bye week. Other side of that bye week, he could come out here and just be an absolute dog. We've seen the post-bye bump happen before, but you can see here weeks 10, 22%, 37%, now 47%. He's pushing all the way for, you know, this is probably the first time this year that he has led this team in snaps at the running back position, and that is very exciting. If that game, you know, if that playing time can get there and we can see him flirt with like 15 touches per game, you are absolutely cooking with Keaton Mitchell. Now, after that, you have Zach Charbonnet's rookie debut here. Or not rookie debut, but Zach Charbonnet in like the first time that he's like the featured running back. Now, they play the buzzsaw that was the 49ers. He ends up with 9.8 PPR points. It's not great, but the usage was good. He had 14 carries, 47 yards. He had 4 catches for 11 yards, so that's not great. But 49 to 56 snaps, great. 26 to 36 route run, great. 4 targets, great. 14 carries, great. So the usage was great. Tough matchup. You would hope that bounces back in the future, but it's also not a positive sign. I will say the Seahawks schedule is absolutely brutal. They have the Cowboys, the 49ers again, the Eagles, then the Titans. Those are all great run defenses. So you're kind of just hoping that Charbonnet gets there on PPR points. We'll truly see. Now, we also have Kyren Williams. Guy went absolutely insane. 63% of the snaps, 8 of 11 on third downs, 3 of 4 inside the 5. He gives you 38.4 PPR points on 22 touches, 204 total yards, and 2 touchdowns. Kyren Williams, back-end RB1 rest of season. Absolutely insane how much Sean Vivet loves the man. And then our final player we'll talk about is Javonte Williams. Just 10.1 PPR points, but this was against the Browns. What's really important to take away here is the volume and the usage. The volume, he has now had 18, 30, 25, 13, and 21 touches in his last 5. So that's under 18 touches just once, under 20 touches just twice in his last 5 for Javonte. Now, when we look at how this has been trending, he set season highs in snap share, in route percentage, in target share, and in long down and distance snaps. And that's really good because, again, these Broncos are good, but they aren't this good. All right, they're kind of hot right now, but they're going to be in games where they're not leading the entire time and beating up on a team like I believe that this time it was the Bears. No, it was the Browns that the Broncos are beating up on. But they're beating up on them. They were killing them. I think there's going to be games where they're not in the lead the entire time. And that bodes well for Javonte Williams if he can start sneaking in to the pass-catching reps here, which we're seeing. 48% of the routes is amazing for him. So while this wasn't a great PPR point game, again, just 10 PPR points, this is a great usage game where you can kind of take this positivity and move forward with it with Javonte because he looks healthy, he's taking on a lot of volume, and gets kind of a light stretch of games here. He gets Houston, the Chargers, Detroit, New England, and then the Chargers to end out his season. So that's really not all that brutal for Javonte, firmly in RB2 moving forward. Now, with all that being said, I appreciate you guys watching. I love you guys. Make sure you're subscribed. Leave a like. And again, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. They'll match your first deposit up to $100. You can see the sign in the back. You can see we are just completely dripped out. I have my ring on me as well. Maybe I'll take out my ring, dust her off real quick. But maybe you can, get a ring of your own. I'm still chasing the elusive ring. I will say I don't know that they even give out the rings anymore, but they are the best. Make sure you check them out. They have a ton of cool stuff. They have that. They have drafts people do all the time, daily drafts. I mess around with sometimes the NBA ones. But as always, that'll do it for me today. And I'll see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm